author, an elementary educator, an entrepreneur, a mother, and so much more. I first want to say thank you so much to Miss Audra, to Jay, and Erica for hosting and planning this event. I'm especially grateful and thankful that they chose me to be a speaker at this phenomenal Inner Glow Summit event. I'm excited to share, and I'm also excited to connect with you after. Today, I want to talk about wholeness in your single season. I know many of us as singles, I'm speaking specifically to single moms, desire marriage. Either you've been in a marriage in your past, or maybe you haven't been married and you still desire marriage. Well, I'm here to give you some encouraging words and some gems of wisdom that have been passed down to me that I want to share also with you. So let's get started. Number one, working on discovering the root of your pain so that you can fully heal. A lot of times as single moms, we deal with our own internal pain, and that resonates with us and can affect us moving forward in our lives. The number two thing that we're going to discuss today is embracing your single season. Embracing, honoring, and accepting it. Number three is working on your wholeness in your single season. Focusing on your divine femininity and focusing on the things that you desire. Focusing on the areas of your life that really matter most to you, that are going to, once you focus on those areas, are going to authentically attract the right opportunities, people, and relationships. So, story time. I have always wanted to be married ever since I was very early 20s, even in my teens. It was something that you could say I kind of idolized, and I thought that that was part of what defined success. And I really didn't truly understand the institution of marriage. I didn't understand what it meant for me, or even what it meant to be a wife. I just knew that I wanted the status of being a wife, of being in a marriage, and that would be what completed me. I know this to be true because some of the relationships that I found myself in. I found myself in a lot of situationships. I found myself with emotionally unavailable men. I found myself practically begging. I know that when my son's father and I split, I had a lot of feelings of bitterness. I've had a lot of feelings of insecurity, a lot of feelings of not being enough and not understanding who I was, my self-worth, or even really loving myself. I was so dead set on getting in a relationship and being married that I lost myself. I lost parts of me, even from my inner child. I lost my creativity. I lost my personality and things that define me because I was so focused on pleasing someone else and being attached to someone else. I was codependent, and I relied on men to validate me. And I had to really figure out where was the root cause of this. I know that when I was in my teen years, my parents divorced, I didn't have my father in my life, and I was going through a very difficult time. My mom worked 2 jobs. She was a single mom. I was being really raised by my grandmother, and she was elderly and also dealing with health challenges. So I started to rebel. In high school, I was very flirtatious and just had some promiscuous ways. When I got to college, those things carried over with me. And again, still wanting to seek the validation and acceptance, especially from men. And so when I ended up having a child, when I got pregnant, I just felt like, this might be it. This was it. Maybe this child will bridge this gap that I feel in my life. Well, that didn't happen. Actually, I broke up with my son's father and we went our separate ways. Unfortunately, that is definitely not what I wanted, because naturally we want our children to grow up in 2-parent households, right? But when you force things, sometimes it is not necessarily for you. So fast forward, in my late 20s, here I go again. I am in a very rebellious state, in and out of situationships, in a promiscuous state of mind, really not loving my body, not loving my health, not you just being really reckless with myself and with men. Eventually, I got into this relationship with a guy that was 14 years older than me. And we started dating, and I thought, hey, this might be it because he's older, he wants to be married again, he had been married, and this will be it for me, right? At this time, I was in my early 30s, and I wanted their life. All my friends were getting married, they were having kids, and they were living the life that I wanted to live. I decided to continue to pursue this relationship, and I found out there were so many lies and deception along the way. When I tried to remove myself from that situation, things got a little bit challenging and difficult and sketchy. I really stepped away from the church at this time. I was not attending church. I wasn't praying. I wasn't around my friends, my family. I felt so embarrassed and ashamed. Actually, this relationship isolated me in so many ways, mentally, physically, emotionally, and definitely spiritually. And so it got time where I had an opportunity to move abroad. And that's when things shifted for me. I filled out an application and went for it, got accepted. I told the guy about it, and he was not happy. He did not want to see me move on without him, and so he begged and pleaded for me to stay. I decided to put myself first, even though it was very difficult, although I wanted the life of marriage, and he knew that. I just, something about it wasn't sitting right with me. But what happened was he proposed. I accepted the proposal. I accepted the proposal mainly for looks. I wanted to appear to the rest of the watching world that, yes, I have made it. Finally, I got married. Finally, somebody accepted me. Finally, somebody decided to choose me as their wife. I didn't go further with that engagement because after a while, things got really toxic and I needed to get an escape. So I moved with family for a few months until I transitioned to living overseas. Now, I share that story because it was such a transitional part of my purpose and such a transitional part to how I got into writing, how I became an entrepreneur, how I became a single mom motivator. Right before I left that relationship, a cousin of mine gifted me with a journal. And I didn't really think much of it. I thought, this is just, this journal, what am I going to do with it? But it became such a huge part of my transition and healing journey. When I moved, I started using my journal as a way to vent the pain that I was dealing with, the pain of the breakup, the pain of leaving and starting something new, the pain of not being where I wanted to be in my life. I started to write every day. I started to record my feelings. I started to record how I was growing out of that, how it was healing my heart, how the brokenness was finally starting to clear up in some ways. After a few months, I went back and I reflected on that journal. And I realized that, wow, this is some good stuff. I really, really poured my heart out in these pages. And it was really, it really uplifted me to say, hey, I can keep going. I don't have to stop here. I can keep going. And it was so powerful to me that I didn't want to keep it to myself. I decided to use that as a catalyst to help other single moms. That was when it started for me. That was the beginning of my manuscript for my first book, You Are Not a Mess, Reclaiming Your Self-Worth in the Midst of Brokenness, and the start of me even speaking into the lives of single moms. But before I get into all of that, one of the major things that I want to share is the fact that you have to be in a place of forgiveness of yourself. Forgiveness of yourself, loving yourself, understanding your value and your worth, and reaffirming to yourself every day that you are enough. That you don't need other people to validate you. God validates you. Doing mirror work, doing affirmations, having your prayer and meditation time, working on yourself, those are all facets of getting yourself in position for healing and to be able to attract greater for your life. So now what has changed for me? My mindset has changed. I have more clarity on my purpose, my confidence, my femininity. A lot of that was taken from me because I was trying to be in control and manipulate the situation. I decided to choose me. I decided that I needed to choose me and to trust God's process for my life. Every time that I tried to step into God's shoes, that's when it backlashed on me. Because I didn't trust him. I didn't trust that he had my best interest. I didn't trust that whoever he has for me has already been selected. And it's just a matter of me trusting and living and enjoying life and being in gratitude. I was so busy worrying, overthinking, and trying to figure life out, comparing my life to so many other people when I really didn't look within myself for the things that I already had. And so I want to encourage you today to do that. So let's talk about these 3 points that I talked about earlier. Number 1, figuring out the root cause. So just like I had to go back into my childhood to discover where was this pain, maybe because of my father not being in the household, maybe because I felt that I was not listened to or accepted. I was teased as a child. I dealt with child abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, so much stuff that I had to endure as a child. And all those things started coming out of my adulthood. I was actually crying out for help. I was crying out for somebody to love me when God already chose me. God already loved me. And he gave me the ability to love on myself even more. And so I urge you today to write that down. If you can, grab some paper, grab a pencil, pen, whatever you can, sticky note. And I want you to write down some things that you're still struggling with from your childhood. You might have not had the same childhood as me, but you might still be struggling with some things, some identity issues, some self-esteem issues. I want you to write those things down, and I want you to figure out, what do you need to do to heal from that? What is your way of healing from things that are healthy for you? Whether it's writing things down, talking to a therapist, tapping into your creativity, forgiving yourself, talking to a family member that might have hurt you. Whatever it is, really figure out what that piece is for you. But getting to the root cause will help with healing, because if you don't get to the root cause, you'll continue to repeat and repeat and repeat patterns. I repeated so many patterns because I wasn't listening to my intuition. I wasn't listening and loving on myself. I wasn't trusting God. I was moving ahead of the game, girl. And guys, too. So I don't want you to make that mistake. And it's not really a mistake. I had to learn to forgive myself. I had to learn to love myself even more in the midst of feeling like I made mistakes. Number 2, another thing about before we recognize the need to move on into a relationship or partnership with someone, we have to be okay with being alone. We have to be okay with who we are, accepting ourselves, loving ourselves, and fully embracing that essence of who we are, our energy, falling back in love with ourselves, not avoiding who we are, not avoiding the pain, doing things for you in that alone time, in that quiet time. Everybody needs that quiet time. My brand encourages single moms to practice self-care. That's honestly what we need. We need to be able to pour into ourselves first. And so while you're in your single season, I know it may be hard. I know that you may be feeling as though, when is my time coming? What's going to happen for me? How am I going to get through this season of my life with grace? And I just want to encourage you to continue to work on yourself. To continue to work on yourself so that you will be in position to emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and physically handle the next level up in your life. In this alone time that I've had to learn to be very patient. I have had to learn to nurture the parts of me that I've been neglecting, the parts of me that I did not like, the parts of me that I was trying to avoid, the parts of me that didn't want to heal because I was so comfortable holding on to pain. I was so comfortable holding on to who hurt me. I was so comfortable with holding on to unforgiveness. I was so comfortable with playing the victim role. And unfortunately, all those things were blocking me, blocking blessings from coming into my life, blocking for me to be used by God, blocking me to be able to use my voice, blocking me from connecting with other single moms, blocking me from even being connected to my future husband. The number 3 thing that I encourage you to do in your single season is really work on those components of your life that matter the most. So we talked about your self-care, healing your brokenheartedness, healing those insecurities that you've dealt with from previous relationships, working on your past relationships that you have with parenting, with your children, with your relationship, your parent wounds, relationship with your friends, with other family members, even relationships centered around your personal, professional life. Working on those relationships, making sure that you are showing up to be your best self in those relationships. Another area that I encourage you to work on is your personal goals. What are some things that you've neglected, things that you've always wanted to do, whether it's traveling around the world, writing a book, whether it is taking up an art class, whatever your heart desires, do it. This is your time to do it. This is your time to embrace your single season in all authenticity and love and acceptance. It's not a bad thing, because guess what? Once you're married, you are not going to get this time back. Enjoy loving on you. Enjoy being in your still space, because guess what? When you love on yourself, it's going to radiate outward to other people. The other thing that I urge you to work on is your finances. What are your financial goals? Do you want to save? Do you want to invest? How are your goals set up for your children? Are you in the right place that you want to be with your career? Ask yourself these questions. Start preparing now. Really make a list of things with your finances that you want to work on and improve. The next part that I want you to think about focusing on is your health. If you are in your 30s, 40s, even 50s or beyond, even if you're in your 20s, I urge you, health is wealth, honey, okay? If we don't have our health, we don't have much else. What are you eating? What are you putting in your body? Are you exercising? What are you putting on your skin? What are you feeding your mind? What are you feeding your spirit? All of these things matter, and I encourage you to focus on your health in your single season. Your health is super important. And without that, how are you going to thrive in the areas that you need to thrive in? The other thing I want you to focus on in your single season is really working on your relationship with your children. I know there was a time in my life where I neglected my son because I was so focused on dating and having a man and being really selfish. And there was a time when he really needed me the most and I wasn't there. So I encourage you to work on your relationship with your children. The other thing I encourage you to work on is your femininity and your feminine and divine power. I know as single moms, a lot of our femininity is compromised because we're playing, two parents in one. We're trying to handle everything and carry all this weight on our shoulders. And we sometimes lose our parts of our femininity because we're trying to do things that a man would do. It's important that you reconnect with your femininity to connect more with your confidence, your self-esteem, your self-love, your self-worth. I'm huge on that. As you consider implementing these 3 points into your life, I encourage you to journal and do affirmations and really, 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 really start changing your mindset and being in expectation for the things that you're asking for. I want you to say these affirmations out loud. I want you to say them out loud to yourself or even write them down and say them later. I am worth it. I am enough. God has designed me for greatness. I am attracting God's best for me. Those are powerful affirmations, and I just strongly urge you and encourage you to say those out loud to yourself. Write them down, post them on your wall. I even advise you to do some guided journaling, writing down some questions that you may have, really challenging your mind to think back and to look deep within to find the answers, because they're there. As I close out, again, I want to thank you for the opportunity for me to be able to share with you a bit of my story and some points that have helped me along my single journey. Remember, you are worthy to receive greatness. Focusing on being whole in your single season instead of worrying about when your husband is coming is so important. Loving on yourself, embracing yourself, affirming yourself, taking care of who you are, putting yourself first is so super important, and I guarantee you that you are going to attract all that your heart desires. I am in the process of finishing up an ebook called I Thought I'd Be Married Already. 7 ways to refocus yourself instead of worrying about the ring. And in that ebook, it's actually a workbook. I share 7 things and areas, such as what I shared with you, of areas that you can focus on to start becoming more whole in yourself instead of worrying about when you're going to get married. Keep in touch with me. I would love to hear from you, and I would love to know what you got out of this.